Hi friends, Father Carey here, and this is another Holy Spirit moment. This one, an episode in our occasional series, Life Lessons from the Ancients. And the ancient that is profiled today is Lucian of Samosata, who has some interesting things to tell us about celebrityhood. A saying misattributed to Andy Warhol has it that all of us want our 15 minutes of fame. We want to be known by others. We want to be contenders. We want to be somebodies. We want people to recognize us as special and important. We want to be celebrities. And to switch the temporal metaphor, we will have our day in the sun, willy-nilly. Well, it's easy to grab onto one's 15 minutes of fame in the times in which we live, isn't it? Because of all of the social media that proliferates, we are able to get our faces and our antics front and center to audiences that would stagger the ancient mind. But there is a downside, because what we can do in order to gather our 15 minutes of fame is to debase ourselves, and that does harm to our character. Lucian of Samosata, who lived in the 2nd century AD, centuries before social media, recognized that danger, and he warns us against it in a short little piece of his entitled The Death of Peregrinus. Lucian hailed from Samosata, which was in Asia Minor. Today we know it as Turkey. He wrote in Greek, which seems to have been his adopted language. He was a satirist, one of the best satirists of the ancient world. And a satirist, of course, is interested in poking holes into sacred cows, in making fun of our assumptions of grandeur, and showing that the emperor has no clothes. And one of his favorite targets in his dialogues were people who liked to preen themselves as celebrities, and who would do anything to acquire celebrityhood. Now, Peregrinus Porteus is one of those characters lampooned by Lucian. Peregrinus is not a fictional character. He actually lived and died in the year 165 AD. He appears to be a person who was absolutely consumed, absolutely obsessed with seeking what Lucian calls glory. The Greek word for glory is kleos, and it typically meant the renown that came to one because of one's virtuous deeds, because of one's noble character. But the sort of kleos that Peregrinus seeks is mere celebrityhood. It's just attention that he wants. That's the glory that he seeks, for his name to be on everyone's lips, regardless of how it gets there. So Lucian takes us through the years of his glory seeking. He starts out, for example, by attaching himself to a Christian community. And it's interesting, the death of Peregrinus, the piece that Lucian writes, is one of our earliest pagan descriptions of a Christian community. And because Lucian rather contemptuously says that these Christians are gullible anyway, since they believe that a guy was crucified and then rose from the dead, really adopt Peregrinus. They buy into all of his self-serving rhetoric. They buy into the kind of charism that he brings to the community. And he hoodwinks them all, and he takes advantage of them, and he robs them of money. And they still accept him as a new Socrates, as Lucian says. Sooner or later, however, the authorities get tired of what they see as his shadiness, and he has to get out of Dodge. So he flees to Egypt. And it's in Egypt that he attaches himself to the school of cynicism. Now, cynicism is an ancient Greek school of thought that basically argues that what human beings need to do is to rid themselves of convention in order to discover their true selves. Peregrinus lives with cynics. He gets famous for being a wise cynic, even though, of course, he's nothing of the kind. He's simply aping the rhetoric that cynics throw around and trying to impress people, again, in his search for kleos, in his search for glory. After a few years, though, his glory begins to recede, and as an old man, he fears that people are no longer really interested in what he's up to. His name is no longer constantly on their lips, and so he decides that he will have one last grand adventure in order to make his renown, to make his glory eternal. So he announces that he is going to build a great bonfire at the end of the next Olympics Games, and he is going to immolate himself on it. And lo and behold, he does. This is a man who is so obsessed with his 15 minutes of fame that he is willing to kill himself in a most hideous way just for the sake of publicity, just for the sake of what he takes to be kleos, which of course, once again, was not at all the Greek understanding of kleos as displaying nobility. In fact, the Greeks would say that another kind of attitude, eidos, or shame, would be more in keeping with what Peregrinus is up to than kleos. Lucian ends his discussion of Peregrinus with this, and I think it's a warning to all of us. Such was the end of the ill-starred Peregrinus, a man who, not to beat about the bush, never gazed steadily at the truth, but whose words and deeds were always, without exception, aimed at glory and popular praise, to the point of even leaping into the fire, though destined not to enjoy the praise for that, since he couldn't hear it. Peregrinus's obsession with glory, then, it seems to me, reaches through the centuries as a warning to those of us today about being too rash and too hungry for our 15 minutes of fame, to sacrifice one's character, to not live in the truth, to be a buffoon or a fool or a showman, to deceive people, to take advantage of people, simply in order to get their attention, is toxic to one's moral character. We pay a high price for that kind of kleos. I'm Father Carey, and this has been another life lesson from the ancients. Thank you for watching. If you are interested, I invite you to subscribe to Holy Spirit Moments. Thank you. I'll see you next time.